He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me talking that grief talk.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
It's the Miami Night Show.
Hey, yeah.
Slow-mo.
He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me talking that grief talk.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
What up, tribe? It's Miami Night Show, Master Grief Coach. Welcome to the Miami Night Show. You got me walking that grief walk. It's time for Grief Talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Night Show, Master Grief Coach.
Andrea Chamblee, husband of 33 years, John McNamara, was killed in a mass shooting at the Annapolis Capitol on June 28, 2018. She finished John's fourth book, His Life Work, a 300-page love letter called A Capital of Basketball on 100 Years of D.C. High School Hoops. Andrea's day job is a government lawyer with the Food and Drug Administration. Andrea's a survivor, fellow with Everytown Survivor Network for gun safety, and a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for gun sense in America. In her advocacy, she has pushed Maryland lawmakers to close the gap by requiring background checks for all rifles and shotguns. John McNamara loved covering sports. He was a master of statistics and ranking. In Capital of Basketball, John discusses the trends and evolution of the game. John built beautiful relationships with coaches, teachers, and the players. McNamara also uncovered the turmoil in the lives of the players and area residents as they dealt with prejudices, educational inequities, politics, and the ways the areas have changed over the years. Today, June 28, 2020, marks 2 years since 5 Capital Gazette employees were killed when a gunman opened fire at the Annapolis office. A memorial to honor John and the 4 pillars will be named the Guardians of Free Speech. It is set to be unveiled in Newman's Park in June 2021. Since John's death, Andrea has become a gun violence prevention advocate, sharing her story with an array of audiences. She's been featured on CBS Evening News, Montgomery Talks Podcast, Gaithersburg Book Festival, WUSA 9, Ignite Annapolis, Great Day Washington, WTOP News, St. John Norwood Forum, USA Today Sports, Washington Post, and now it's the Miami Night Show Grief Talk.
And welcome back, Grief Nation listeners. Today we have a very special guest. This is pertaining to our series, which is the Everytown Survivor Network edition with Andrea Chamblee. She is a gun violence survivor. Hello, Andrea. How are you?
Hi. I just finished moving my house today, so I'm happy to sit down and exhale a little bit.
All right. I'm so glad to have you here, and thank you once again for coming on the show. So tell us your journey of being a mass shooter survivor, and how did this occur?
Well, it felt pretty unremarkable that morning, almost 2 years ago, June 28th, 2018. My husband was pulled off sports at the newspaper to help cover the primary election in Maryland, and he was really tired because the election went on till 2 and 3 in the morning, and he stayed and was helping other people. And he got up by 7 and was getting ready to go back in. And I asked him if he could work from home, and he said, no, my coworkers need me. And he went to work, and I went to work, and it was a beautiful sunny day. I was outside at my workplace cafeteria. They have a patio, and I was working out there on the wireless, and people started emailing me, asking me about Annapolis and what was happening in Annapolis. And finally I got one that said, is John okay? And I said, all right, I have to Google this and find out what's happening. And my heart just stopped. I saw that there was a mass shooting at the Annapolis Capitol, and they didn't know who got out and who didn't. And so I ended up waiting about 10 hours for the police to knock on my door and tell me that my husband didn't make it out, along with 4 of his coworkers, Rob, Wendy, Gerald, and Rebecca.
I'm so sorry that has happened to you and your husband. I know that turned your world upside down. just receiving that news, and first of all, the anticipation of finding out if it was all true. And thank you so much for leading us into what happened, because having that visual of what you were experiencing is important for people to know, that journey of, what happened and how you did
It's,
find it.
for a lot of us, it's just an ordinary day that comes back and turns our life upside down.
Absolutely. Can you please share the life of your dear husband, John, and his published works? Who was he?
He was a sports writer since high school. He played basketball. He loved the game. He covered it. And the DC area is just so rich with a basketball history. So since 1978, he was the high school sports editor of a newspaper. He went to Maryland and he covered the Terrapins. He got to go to the national championship with the team. He got to go to the World Series with the Baltimore Orioles. He was so happy when the Washington Nationals came to town. And the thing about John and sports is a lot of times if you read a sports article and you don't know about the sport yet, you can't figure out what's happening from the article. The article is written by sports lovers for sports lovers, and it keeps out new fans and women and kids who are trying to figure out the game. And John never did that. John could tell you stuff you didn't see if you were a big fan, and people always said that they never thought of some things he thought of. And then people who never understood the game before and were frustrated told me that when he explained the game to them, they understood it and they saw why people loved it. So he was a sports writer, and with all the layoffs and buyouts happening in journalism, he told me he really wanted to be remembered as a sports writer, but he didn't think that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. He was going to be laid off like so many other people, and just fade away. And so when he died, I decided I wanted him to be remembered as a sports writer. Mm-hmm. And he had written a book on Maryland football, the history of that for 100 years. He wrote about the national championship and a book with a bunch of other writers together. Got the book out within a few weeks after the championship win in 2002. And he wrote a book called Cole Classics about the great games at Cole Fieldhouse, and not just basketball games. There were concerts, there were women's games that people didn't see. There was the first desegregated team against a team that was still segregated, and the desegregated team kicked their butt and made people think twice about the awful segregation that was happening in sports. And then he had this one he was working on for 13 years, mm-hmm. interviewing people and finding pictures and going to the library and looking at microfiche. People don't even know what microfiche is anymore, mm-hmm. I think. And when I saw how far along he got on this book, I knew we had to finish it.
Wow. That's such an honor to have completed the works that he had started and put so much into, and you just having the ability and the strength to, read over it, just to look at his work. That's hard. That really is hard, just to look at it. Explain those feelings when you start diving into it.
It was awfully hard. But the more I proofread it and the more I got over the typos and things, not too many, but he would have the names of the schools without the names of the mascot, and so I'd be putting those together. And all of a sudden, and maybe it was the 15th time I was proofreading it for the publisher that I got, mm-hmm. I really got a chance to relish the stories. I mean, this area started the game of basketball. Some people went from DC to Massachusetts to Dr. Naismith to Springfield, where people say basketball started, but that was a 9-man passing only game. They had to stop the game every time someone got a basket and get the basket out of the peach basket because they didn't think to cut out the bottom. Mm-hmm. So the two men that brought it from here started a legacy of coaching and mentoring, not just in sport, but in civics and government and community involvement. The one man who did most of it, who turned it into a 5-man running game, started the NAACP because the kids really wanted to play each other. They didn't want to put up with these adults that said, there was playground games you have after school. You'll never play those guys in a tournament game. They wouldn't put up with it. So he got the game desegregated, and it was probably the first sport to be desegregated because the kids didn't need any access to any special golf course or tennis court or football field. They could play wherever they wanted, and they did. And these men grew up to be coaches. Morgan Wooten is the standard bearer. He coached for over 40 years and won games, and he's in the Hall of Fame, the only high school coach in the Hall of Fame. And his funeral was 2 months ago, and 300 men stood up when they asked who became a coach because of Morgan Wooten. And that's the legacy of this town. That's the story John wanted to tell, about how kindness and caring and dedication has changed so many people's lives.
Absolutely. He sounds like an amazing man. I know he was to you. And through all of that, please kind of explain like the complexities along the journey and how you was able to move through those grief stages to process, share, your emotional support team that did also do that for you.
Well, one thing I learned about grief is it's not linear. In fact, I'm reading a book now called Love Warrior, which says it's like you're on a spiral staircase, right? So your grief is always in front of you and always behind you, but you're still moving with it. And I thought that was the perfect visual. You can't escape it. You just have to tend it and take care of it and acknowledge it. And that's one of the things I just thought was so important about Moms Demand Action. They contacted me within 48 hours and asked, what do you want? And I didn't know. They did, though. They told me some of the things I would probably want. But over time, I told them, okay, now I know what I want. I want to do something.
Yeah.
And just use me, because I need to replace all the other people in the future who are going to be in this spot if I don't do anything. I want to stand where they would be standing and make sure they don't have to be on this spiral staircase with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being brave just to even come to share your story and then finally realizing your place and to be able to support other individuals that have had, likeness to the type of death that your husband died by, and just your process, because hearing from, and I truly believe this, hearing from the survivors and how you were processing and how you're able to share your story is so effective. And that's why we have this show, so that you can be the voice for others to come forward and do, exactly what you're doing. So thank you for sharing your work. After reading over your bio and of seeing what you've done in the community, it speaks for itself. So please share the advocacy side and your commitment to the life that you're living now.
Well, once I told Moms Demand Action I wanted to help, they asked me to testify for the bill. I think one of the ways my voice can be added to the demands is, people, whenever there's a tragedy, even the coronavirus now, people will come up with reasons why it won't happen to them. I think that's the human condition, right? We say, I don't know anyone who's this happens to. This can't happen to me. I'm following the right rules. I'm doing the right things. And that didn't matter
Yeah.
to me or anybody in a mass shooting. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter, you know, whether you're a domestic violence victim or a mom in the city that is caught in this terrible scourge of gun violence. People can come up with stories about why it won't happen to them. And on one face of it to say, your story isn't, won't protect you. Your story won't protect you.
Absolutely.
And I think I need to do that for everybody, no matter what their story is. There's not one story where somebody did everything right and somebody did everything wrong. We're just all caught in this scourge.
Yeah.
And we have the power to stop it. And that's what can be even more frustrating and makes you feel helpless to think we could stop it if we just had the political will. But we are the political will.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure we are the political will.
Absolutely. You shared also too with me that you work with the Food and Drug Administration so what is your advice in our current COVID-19 era? What are some of the challenges in that field that you can share with us?
Well, I'm pretty lucky. I can work remotely. I have enough, I have enough computers to work remotely. I have colleagues who can work remotely and help me. My paycheck's not in jeopardy. So I'm trying to recognize my luck and figure out how I can share it with other people. But I guess one of the trickiest parts of this particular pandemic is that I can self-isolate and my family can self-isolate. And even then I might be able to see my family, but the more you enlarge your circle of people that you're with, whether it's at the grocery store or visiting someone you already know and love, all you need is one person in those circles who is not washing their hands or wearing a mask or that's going out carelessly or even just necessarily. Maybe they're a healthcare worker. The more people in your circle who can't follow each rule exponentially makes it more dangerous for you. So if you don't want coronavirus, if you don't want to give it to your grandmother or your doctor, then you need to just stick it out for as long as you can. Yeah. And we need to support financially the people who can't afford to do that.
Absolutely. You're speaking about your Food and Drug Administration. What is happening there that you can tell us or share with us as far as, what's happening in that world where you work, that and how the COVID-19 is affected there, if any, is it? Because I don't know. Well,
we're approving products, and maybe not for unlimited sale and distribution, but we're making products available to as many people as we can. So we made a test that was supposed to be limited to helping hospitals figure out how to triage people. It wasn't supposed to be the final word on whether you had COVID-19 or not. It was just supposed to help people decide who could come into the emergency room safely. So there are tests that we've made available. There's a new saliva test now. Perhaps that's what they've been using. My guess is that's what they've been using in the White House the whole time, because the nasal swab, the brain swab, is pretty uncomfortable.
I'm sure.
But the more testing we have, the more contact tracing we can do, and the more you'll know whether you can expand your circle of people you expose yourself to, if everyone can get tested. And then that means the more we can go out, and hopefully, the vaccine is going to take probably another year. Unfortunately. So this may be a really long period where we have to be careful. But something as simple as checking for a fever can really help reduce the spread of this. I'm sort of hoping that checking for a fever, let's say before you enter an airplane or before you go on a cruise, is something that they start doing even after this is over. I hope we learn to screen and care, and I think we're going to be the generation that washes our hands the best ever.
I agree.
So 20 years from now, kids are going to be saying, that old lady won't stop washing her hands. And we're going to be going, yes, we won't.
But we're
In some ways, that's going to change us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because of the extent of your work life and advocacy work, tell us how important self-care is to succeed in both of those.
Well, other than washing your hands, and I know some people are going to say, "Is that all you got? Wash your hands?" And yes, that's all you need.
That's what's important. Yeah.
That's all you need. It's all I got. It's all you need. And the same thing with self-care. It's I guess the first day after the police came to my door, they didn't come to my door till 10 p.m. So I think I just slept all the next day and cried and slept and cried. The next day, my sister says, "You're coming with me to my yoga class." And I had been in a work situation that was making me unhappy, and I was exercising every day just to stay sane. And I can just say, thank goodness I was already pretty fit when this happened. Because if I had been where I had been like 5 or 10 years before with no exercise, I don't think I would have made it through, frankly. So get fit now. But my sister took me to yoga, and after the class, I just said, this is going to save my life. I can't stop going. So I have it on my calendar. If someone tells me they have a lunch meeting that I have to go to, I tell them, sorry, I have a conflict. Yeah. I have a meeting with my boss. And I don't say, it's the boss of me. But,
right. Absolutely.
But you have to treat it like it's urgent. I mean, people treat it like it's important, but you don't do important things every day. You do urgent things every day.
Absolutely.
So you have to treat it like it's urgent, because one day when you can't exercise, there'll be an urgency, and you'll need to draw on that strength and fitness and clarity of mind that you've prepared yourself for. So for me, exercise, especially yoga, has been really important. It also used to be getting my nails done, but it's not happening right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So sleep and exercise, and there's a group of young men in Maryland that started a business called Hungry Harvest, where they take food that's been rejected by the grocery stores and they sell it to you for a song. It's cheap. And then they, for every box I buy, they give a box to Baltimore City schools, so their parents can pick up a box when they pick up their kids from school. And they're rejected because the apples are too small to go through the little apple judging thing that stores make you use. And
okay.
So there's nothing really wrong with the quality of the fruit. It's just not pretty enough. But it's the freshest fruit and vegetables I've ever had. So Hungry Harvest, I want to give a shout out to them, and my yoga teachers.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that information, and just even mentioning Hungry Harvest and to us and to our to my listening audience, because and you said that's in the Maryland area, right?
Yeah, they specialize in and around Baltimore, but they also do the DC metro area, and they've moved up and down the East Coast now. They're in Philly and a few other major markets. They got some Shark Tank money and ran with it. And I think when you Google Hungry Harvest, a competitor who's paid more pops up. So don't click on the first one. Click on the Hungry Harvest one.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. For just giving us some resources and letting us know about the programs that didn't ever know that there was rejection of food, through the grocery store. but it's good. It's still good, because I was definitely going to ask, like, why is it rejected? But thank you so much for clearing that up. That was awesome. So how can the community support you? I know briefly in your bio you stated some things. Can you mention those things for us? How we can support you?
Well, that's a good question. I feel like I've gotten more than my share of support at this point. It's the 2-year mark. It's going to be hard. I'd love for people to read the stories that John told in his book about these remarkable coaches and players. I think Kevin Durant is going to do a documentary about the same subject, and I'm hoping he'll use I heard he needs pictures, so I have pictures. I have 178 pictures in this book. I told him you can use them. But the stories are just heartwarming. And I don't know, just vote. This year they're going to make it really hard for us to vote. They're going to expect us to expose ourselves to the coronavirus if we vote in person. They're going to lose ballots if we vote by mail. They're going to demand IDs from people. That they're going to make it hard. And we just have to remember how hard people fought for us to vote, and how it's our voice. And if everybody voted, we wouldn't be in this mess, and they know it. That's why they make it hard for us to vote.
Yeah.
I just think of the people who marched and died so they could cast a ballot, and I owe it to them to cast mine. And we all do. And we all just have to get over the hurdles and fuss and sound and fury, and just tell them to take our ballot and count it.
Absolutely. And you had shared that there's a scholarship in John's name. Can you talk about that?
Oh, thanks. I mentioned that John really wanted to be remembered as a sports writer. So with the help of one of his friends, Doug Donatelli, he's got a business management company, he put the seed money in for the John McNamara Memorial Sports Writer Scholarship at the University of Maryland. And we've been able to get it endowed. We've given the first scholarship to a really worthy writer. The students have been willing to listen to what I liked about John's writing, and said, you have to write for everybody. Don't just write for the guy who's showing up, to put money down in Vegas on a game, who thinks he knows everything. Write it for other people too. Write it for the kid who's going to their first game, and the mom who's trying to understand why her son loves a sport, or nowadays, thank goodness, why her daughter loves the sport. And so that scholarship has started, and I hope more people can find out about it and donate to that worthy cause.
Absolutely. Are there requirements for the scholarship? What does one do to even be able to get it?
They just have to be a student at the University of Maryland. They can even be a freshman coming in who's got it, because freshmen now come in with video blogs and all kinds of material to show their commitment to writing and journalism and sports. Mm-hmm. And so we tried to make it easy. So any student who's declared a journalism major is eligible.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. What's next for your journey?
Well, I have to unpack some boxes tonight so I can find my way through to the bedroom and go to sleep.
Right.
So I'll be unpacking and moving. I was accepted to the Emerge Maryland program, which trains women to run for office in Maryland. And there's other Emerge groups all over the country. And right now, there's a senator in the area where I'm moving to who voted against background checks for shotguns and rifles. It passed, but the governor, our governor in Maryland, vetoed that bill. And we suspect that we're going to be one Senate vote short of an override. So I'm watching this senator, and I'm going to learn how to fundraise and perhaps I retire next year just in time for a new term to begin, and maybe I'll be a full-time politician.
All right. Congratulations. We will be sending you some distant Reiki love, just for that whole entire process for you. You have the heart, and you're very compassionate about this. Just hearing just what you just said. So I'm praying that for you, and all the success for that.
Oh, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. You know, I know a lot of your listeners are grounded and spiritual, and sometimes it occurs to me that, you know, we have the power to have something pretty close to heaven right here on earth. We have enough food for everybody. We have enough water. We have enough ocean and mountains, and we have enough love and kindness for everybody right here. And we have to stop the people who want to take that away from us.
Well said. I have chill bumps. Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Well said. Well said. Share your personal quote with my Grief Nation listeners and why you chose that.
Well, the last two movies that John and I saw together were a documentary on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is awesome, and on Fred Rogers, who started Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And he was always, something I didn't realize, he was always unsure of whether he was good enough to be on TV, whether he was making an impact on the world. And that just floored me, that somebody with the power of kindness of Mr. Rogers would doubt himself. And after 9/11, one of the quotes that was really popular from him was, when people wanted to explain how there could be so much evil in the world, he just said, look at the people who are responding with kindness. And there are many more of them. And I often, you know, a lot of people have talked about John and my marriage and made it sound like nobody had as good a marriage as we did. And yeah, that's probably true. But you know, we weren't perfect. We weren't kind every minute of every day, but John was kind every day. And so Mr. Rogers said, and gosh, I can't remember his exact words, but he said, look at the kindness that people are expressing. And that's Moms to Me in Action, man. Those people came out of the woodwork for me. If it weren't for people like them, I'd be convinced the world was full of, you know, mean mass murderers, but it's not. Yeah. It's not. There's more of us than of them, and we're going to show them.
Absolutely. Wow. You're so powerful. And say that to yourself every day. Look in the mirror and just say that to yourself every day, because really you are. Your word speaks volumes, and I can hear the kindness and the softness, and that's what we need. That's what we need. I hear that in your voice, and I know I'm hopeful that your journey with where you were just accepted. I'm wishing you much love and light, and that everything is very prosperous for you in that lane. So how can we reach you? What are your social media platforms?
Well, thanks. I'm on Instagram as A.E. Chamblee, and I'm on Twitter as Andrea Chamblee. So the gun nuts have found me. But so will you, right? You'll find me too. So Andrea Chamblee on Twitter is where I'm more active.
Okay, great. Well, leave us with your favorite memory of John.
So the quote was, "Look for the helpers." So that's how. Sorry, I was stumped. There are so many words for it. So I know you guys are all the helpers, and looking for you and watching you is so empowering, and everyone should join you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Miami, that means I love you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And your last thoughtful memory of John. How do you remember him?
I think it's the fact that he did something kind every day. Every day to me, every day to his family of origin. His little sister was volunteering and was in a car accident, and she was in rehab for a year, and she lived with us. And every day he performed an act of kindness.
Wow. So powerful. Thank you so much. And before I let you go, I always ask this question. What has your attention being a leader in your community that you would like to see change or bring further awareness to?
What would I like to see changed? I think a lot of the world's problems would be reduced if we let everybody vote, everybody participate, with their strengths and gifts. And every time I read a story about somebody whose life was cut short, or who was thrown in jail, or who was caged at the border, I think, do you know what that person could have contributed if we let their voice be heard, if we listened to their song? One way to do that is vote. One way to do that is to lift each other up. And I hope we can do that even more every time, every year. We need to do better at that.
Wow. Andrea, thank you so much for your vulnerability, for coming on to the show, for sharing your story. I wish you many blessings on your journey and on your continued journey. And once again, just thank you for being on the Miami Night Show Grief Talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you on the spiral staircase.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, there you have it, Grief Nation listeners, and thank you for tuning in to another transformative segment on It's the Miami Night Show Grief Talk. Today, we give thanks filled with love and gratitude for our special guest, Andrea Chamblee, for expressing your very unique grief journey and sharing ways of understanding the healing process. This is your girl, Miami Night, with much love and light until we connect again spiritually. Bye-bye.
Going slow mo.
He's got me talking that Greek talk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
It's the Miami Night Show.
Hey, yeah.
Slow mo.
He's got me walking that Greek walk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me talking that Greek talk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
What up, Tribe? It's Miami Night Show Master Grief Coach. Welcome to the Miami Night Show. You got me walking that grief walk. It's time for Grief Talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Night Show Master Grief Coach.